This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. The crew is live this week for the first time in months from Indianapolis's Ash&Elm Cider Company. Still social distancing, the ladies of the Cold Case Chronicles are outside in great weather with a great crowd telling tales of cold cases. Tonight is about Tricia Meredith. On April 7th, 1989, 19-year-old Tricia was brutally murdered in an apartment complex laundry room. This is Tricia Meredith, live from Ash&Elm, and you're listening to The Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret. I know the truth. I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.
Tricia Meredith, but she started out when she was born as Tricia K. Walden. She was born on December 10th of 1967 to Carl and Jackie Hopper. And when she was born, like a lot of marriages, the marriage didn't last. And so when Tricia's mom remarried, then her new husband ended up adopting Tricia and her little sister. They were in grade school about that time, just starting elementary. Now, Tricia and Dina, her sister, when they were adopted, then her mom and dad ended up having another son, or a son. They were sisters, obviously, not another son. So they had a brother named Brandon. Tricia was described by her family as being all girl, much like this one. All pink, she loved dolls, frilly, just typical all-American girl, stereotypical girl. And her family didn't have a lot of money, but they had each other. So they described themselves as being very typical in terms of holidays. They would get together.
We have a disgruntled fan.
Yeah, we're can you shush over there? We're recording as well.
We're kind of rude. Something.
It worked.
It did.
We're talking about way more important things than your car alarm.
Yeah, it worked. Somebody here must have started that.
Then they ran out.
Yeah, they ran out. Well, so they get together at holidays and those type of things, and Tricia was very well liked at school, which it's funny that you mentioned that she was well liked as well, because I thought about every case that we do, every case that you hear about, everyone says, oh, they were really well liked. And have you ever heard of any case where someone says they were a bitch?
Well, if I were murdered on my way home tonight, what would you say that about?
I would say, she was a real bitch, but I mean, I liked her.
Like,
no, I would.
But if you didn't say that, I would haunt you for the rest of my eternity. Really, we get it.
Yeah.
Stop.
That's enough. But, people always say they were so nice. And so does that mean that only nice people get murdered?
Well, good thing I'm never going to get murdered.
I know, you're never going to be killed. Because everyone always says you're so nice. But today. I digress. Tricia was very nice. And she was super respectful, polite, very well mannered. And she graduated from Ben Davis in 1985. And although she really wanted to be a nurse, I'm being mocked. She really wanted to be a nurse, but again, her family didn't have the money, so she decided she would start working at a local grocery store. And it was O'Malia's Food Market, which we don't have anymore, I don't believe. I don't know
I've
for
heard
sure.
of O'Malia's.
No,
I think it's in
don't, but-
Mooresville. Are you sure?
I think they've all closed.
Yeah, I think they're
yeah,
closed
because
now.
O'Malia's, a lot of them became Marsh.
In Mooresville.
A long time ago.
Like, not that long ago.
At least.
Maybe, okay, it was a long time.
At least 20 years
Time
ago.
goes so fast sometimes.
All right, at least 17 years ago.
Somebody Google that.
Yeah.
Joey, Google it. Tell me if there's an O'Malley's.
Is there O'Malia's? Is that a thing?
In Mooresville. Right across from the swimming pool.
That is still open in 2020.
Yeah. Be specific.
Anyway, back to the story.
Yeah. She was working there in 1980s, and she was a cashier. While she was there, she met her love of her life, and he worked in the meat department at the same don't make an inappropriate joke. Do not do it.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
Was that their meet cute?
No.
I didn't make it inappropriate. Thank
Dad joke.
We may actually have yelled at someone who was in trouble in that car.
Yeah, they're actually signaling for help, and we just yelled.
And
we're sorry.
Is anyone else overstimulated?
And I'm going to talk about that later. So she was working at this grocery store. She met her future love, David Fain. Now, he was only 2 years older than her. They decided after 6 months that they were going to move in together, which back then wasn't really common that you just instantly move in together. And she had always been a homebody, loved her parents, loved her family, and she was really nervous about moving in. But she was excited about it as well. She didn't work there any longer. She started working as a stock clerk for Lieberman Enterprises. But they moved into these apartments, and she was only 19. He was 21. They were super excited, though, and so they moved in to Indy's West Side. It was at 46th and High School Road, Spring Hill Apartments, which are still there. This was on April 7th, 1986. They'd only lived there for a little over a week, and everything changed at that day. It was unseasonably warm, just like today, for April, and people are outside. There's a golf course nearby. People were outside playing golf. People were out working on their cars. It was around 6 p.m. They decided they needed to go do some laundry. It used to be back in the day, and still a couple of apartment complexes where you have laundry rooms in the apartments. So you didn't have laundry facilities inside each apartment complex. And so they went to the laundry room at Spring Hill, which was across the street from their apartment, but still in the same complex. It was only about a block away, 75 yards, and they went, put their clothing in, hung out for a couple of minutes, and then she decided, according to David, she tells him to go and unpack a few things because they'd only been there a week. He goes back to the apartment, leaves her there, because anyone who's ever used a laundry room that's a public place knows you don't leave your shit there and walk away, because you're going to come back and it is not going to be there. Or
I could actually say that from personal experience. Yes. It'll just be on the floor or on top of something. See,
it's in the 80s. There was like your Hilfiger stuff, your Polo stuff, everything is going to be picked through. And
it was IOU.
IOU? I don't even know that, and I'm older than you.
Well, maybe, never mind.
Maybe I was poor? Yeah. Okay, just say it, okay?
But no, if you find your laundry sitting on the floor or on top of another machine, you don't trust it. You're like, well, this has to go for another cycle, and when you're a poor college student, you might not have enough quarters
for that. People will take that out and just sit it on the floor or wherever. So she didn't want to leave her clothes. She stayed with the laundry. He goes back to the apartment. And while he was at the apartment, he's going to make a phone call. Like I said, it was still daylight. What's to be afraid of, right? I mean, they're kids, basically, 19 and 21. They live their entire life without fear. They're not like us. If you like murder and wait, that's a bad choice of words.
If you are solving murder cases.
Yes. If you're interested in investigating murders, then you always have the back of your mind, like Alicia said, the escape routes and what would you do? And you lay in bed at night thinking, what would I do if? And these type of things. But normal people don't think like that. They don't think about things that could happen to them. And here is a picture of, yes, I said picture, I'm from the South, of the laundry room. And so it's just a tiny little place, but the windows are extremely large. And so you can see inside. That's good and bad. You can see inside, so you feel safe, but yet people can see that you're also in there alone. So that's not good.
So David went back to the apartment, and while he was there, he made a phone call to his grandmother, which lasted from approximately 6:17 p.m. to 6:42 p.m. So during that time, there were golfers on the golf course nearby. You know, it was a nice day. It was sunny. People wanted to get out and have one last round before it got cold. So these golfers that were out on the course later told police that they actually heard screaming coming from the apartments that lasted for a solid 10 seconds. And actually, one of the golfers had said at the time, well, it sounds like somebody's being murdered over there, and kind of like in a joking way, like, ha-ha. Yeah. But they didn't think anything seriously of it.
Now, and that was my point with the alarm going off over there. Like, I would think that if I heard a scream right at that house that was a solid 10 seconds that sounded like someone being murdered, I would either go check it out or at least call the police.
Amy.
Yes.
Who goes to golf courses?
Yeah, touche.
Old white dudes.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, screams don't mean the same thing for them that they do for us.
Well, I just hope they feel like shit now that someone was murdered. That's all I have to say about that.
So David ended his phone call and went back to help Tricia bring the laundry in. And that was at about 6:45. So he walked back into the laundry room and didn't see Tricia or anybody else. And then he happened to look around the corner and saw small amounts of blood in front of the washers, dryers, and saw a huge pool of blood in front of the door to a utility closet. And he opened the door and found Tricia. Tricia was inside the closet. She had been stabbed in the chest and abdomen, and her throat had been slashed. They later found that she had been stabbed 24 times, but she also did have defensive cuts on her arms and hands, meaning she tried to fight back. She saw that there was a danger, and she tried to fend off her killer. So David ended up, instead of being freaking out and running outside for help, he actually went all the way back to their apartment and called Tricia's mother. And Tricia's mom was the one that ended up calling 911.
Yeah, it is weird, but yet...
I mean, I get it. There were no cell phones at the time. You couldn't just whip out your phone and call 911. But this was an obvious emergency situation, I'm sure he knew how to call 911.
And we've said in the past in different cases that, I don't like to judge people for how they react in a situation of a trauma. It's easy to be on this side of the table and say, well, I would have done this or I would have done that. But you've been taught since birth to, as soon as you can hold a phone, 911 is the first number that you're taught. You know? And
exactly.
That would be the first thing you would think you would do, would be call 911. Technically, I would think that you would go to the very first door closest to the laundry room and try and
you would start banging on the neighbor's door and say, call 911, there's my girlfriend's been stabbed.
But if you're in shock, you really don't know how you would react, what you would do. So
just
it's
to
hard
confirm,
to judge.
for those of us born after the 80s, was 911 around?
Go fuck yourself.
Actually, I remember when 911 became a thing.
911 was a thing.
Well, what year was it?
It was after that song 911's a joke in your town.
I never heard it.
I've never heard of that.
Is that a real song?
It's a real song.
Okay.
Just shush.
She's sarcastic.
It's
never
Flava
know.
Flav.
You're fired.
So while Tricia's mom was calling the police, David ran back to the laundry room and pulled Tricia out of the closet and onto the floor, which in the first instance of finding any type of body, the first rule is to leave everything as it is. So right when he did that, that actually compromised part of the future investigation by moving, potentially covering potential evidence that could have been on her body.
And why would you want to do that? I mean, if you saw already that...
Maybe he thought she was still alive.
Then do it initially.
I don't know if maybe...
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, also he was 21, and a lot of 21-year-olds don't know what's happening. Yeah. If we wanted to defend him in that way.
But as someone who has been certified in CPR, my first response would be to be are you breathing? I'd check your pulse and see if you were breathing.
Oh, I thought you said, are you bleeding? I'm are you?
Are you and sure? Then my third question is, are you bleeding?
Yeah.
So luckily there was a police officer very nearby, and he got the 911 call. So he came to the complex. David was outside, and his hands were covered in blood, and led them to where Tricia was. And David ended up taking a polygraph test later on, and the apartment was searched, his car was searched, and they couldn't find anything linking him to the crime. And they were able to verify that he was on a phone call, that there had been a call placed to his grandmother between 6:17 and 6:42, lasting approximately 25 minutes. And based on that alone, he was ruled out as a suspect.
And there's a lot of conversation online of people that think that he did it, that say, well, he could have made that phone call to his grandma and then walked away. You know, he could have dialed the number and then walked away. But that's a stretch to me. I mean, you know,
at that point,
you can, if you want to make this murder, and, you know, people can think of things like that, but yet this is a gruesome crime scene. That's a lot of stab wounds. You're not going to just do that and walk away with just blood on your hands.
Oh, no, you're going to be covered.
Yes.
But even then, both parties would have had that. Like, Grandma wouldn't wait that long for you. Well, she has no time left. She knows this.
So
she is not waiting 24 minutes.
True story, I have fallen asleep on the phone when I had a friend of mine that was talking, because she just like, and it's neither of you, by the way. But, you know, just kept talking, and I've fallen asleep and woken up like 30 minutes later and she was still talking. So you never know what kind of grandma he's got.
And we never found collaboration from the grandmother saying like, oh yeah, we talked for a while. So that's why we're kind of just thinking like, well, maybe he asked her something like, oh, tell me about the time when you were growing up during this time. And then she just went off on this tangent and didn't stop talking and was like, are you there?
I just can't buy into that based on the evidence and how bloody it had to be. Besides the fact that the knife, when you stab someone, not that I've stabbed a lot of people, but when you stab someone, your hand, it's a lot harder to go through a body with a knife than you think. Again, not that I know by personal experience, but and your hand will slip down on the blade. So oftentimes you cut yourself. There was no wounds on him, you know, so it just doesn't seem likely that it would be him. So if he didn't do it, then what does that leave? The police show up and they say that between 6:30 and 6:40 is when the crime happened, based on the wash cycle, because it takes 25 minutes to do a load of laundry in the washing machine, and she had already transferred the laundry into the dryer. So they believe that the crime happened between 6:30 and 6:40. So you have the golfers who say that they heard the screaming around 6:30. You have tenants at the apartment complex that say that they also heard screaming somewhere around 6:15. Now, people don't remember exact times. A lot of, you know, if you said right now, if you heard someone ask any of you right now, what time was it that you heard the sirens or that sound go off?
8:00.
Yeah, you know, none of us are going to be able to say an exact time, because although we heard it, we could only give an estimate, and a lot of us are going to be about 15 minutes off.
I don't know,
so
like 7:42.
7:40.
All right,
we're already 2 minutes off. I would probably say 7:30 just to give a roundabout. So people are going to be off on times. So it was really hard for them to pinpoint a time, but they did estimate that it was between 6:30 and 6:40. So it was a very slim window for all of that violence to happen, because he left, he went back to his apartment, and what I believe happened is someone then saw that she was alone, and that was their opportunity to go inside. Now, she didn't have a purse with her or money, so what was the motive? What was the reason that someone went in? She was wearing a red T-shirt that had "You've Come a Long Way, Baby" on it, and that was a slogan from Virginia Slim cigarettes back in the 80s. And yeah, you didn't know that, did you, 80s girl?
They used to advertise for cigarettes a lot.
So cigarettes used to be a thing back in the 80s.
You could take the package from your cigarettes and mail them in, and they would be like,
they'd send you a T-shirt. So she had this T-shirt on. She had tennis shoes, white shorts, and she had on a silver watch. She had a gold heart ring, a gold necklace, earrings on. So it obviously wasn't robbery, because they would have taken her watch and her necklace, you would think. But her clothing was very disheveled, so they believed that maybe sexual assault was the motive, but they just didn't succeed because she did fight back based on the defensive wounds. So they believe she did fight back, and it was just so out in the open, and with the windows there, after all that fighting, the blood spatter actually went behind the dryers, and so they felt like she was trying to hide behind it and get away from the attacker. So it was just a lot of fighting and her trying to get away, and so then they just gave up and they killed her and put her in the closet. Now, it's hard to determine if they put her in the closet or if she was trying to get away and went herself into that closet, and that's just where the final murder occurred, in the closet. And that's kind of what I think, because I don't think they would have taken the time to try and hide her body. I think she was just trying to get away, and hoping that he would come back before that occurred. Now, if the attempt was sexually motivated, then they still needed to know who it was. And one of the tenants that had finished her laundry at 6:15 said that she saw a group of workers, like construction workers, that were in the laundry room right after David, or just right before David and came in and found Tricia. She thought it was unusual, but why would that really be unusual? You know, that workers would be in part of the complex. Like, to me, that isn't something that would stick out to me to be unusual. Like, if you live in an apartment complex and there's construction workers that come into a laundry room.
Whereas if they're not construction.
At 6:30?
I mean, people that work in construction and work in apartment complexes are constantly in and out of buildings. So to me, that just didn't seem anything really odd. But they said that there was people that were working in that area on the apartments, and they were from St. Louis. They were in town, and they were from St. Louis. Now, we tried to reach out to the retired detective. He retired from this case, and then he went on to work at Indianapolis Airport, but he is now retired from there as well, so we couldn't find him. But I was wondering, you know, at that point, did they reach out to those guys in St. Louis and try to find out? But it's really difficult for me to believe that a group of people would do this and then no one would tell. It's hard to keep a lot of people's mouth shut. You know, like this, it seems like a 1-2 people at best ordeal. Like, I have a hard time thinking it was a group of people. But they were there working on a clubhouse roof, which was about a block away that afternoon. They were, however, interested in a guy that lived right across from the laundry room. His name was William Radiker. And people often have a tendency to put themselves into the crime scene, kind of interject themselves into the investigation whenever they've done something. And that would fit William perfectly, because he would stand outside his apartment while they were investigating the crime and really pay attention, start watching. And so the police took note of that, and they started talking to him. And they noticed that he was watching them process the crime scene, but he also had recording equipment set up in his apartment and was recording everything that was going on. Yeah, and so
with audio or video?
Audio. And according to the Indy Star, during an interview at his apartment, he provided details that should have only been told by someone with very intimate knowledge of the crime.
So things that aren't available in any of the articles that we read.
Right.
How does that, like, immediately not get... I've seen enough, like...
to know that he should have been. Yeah.
I mean, also we could look at that to be like, oh, he was just into stuff like that. Like, I guarantee if any of us witnessed a crime, we'd probably be trying to film it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I think, unfortunately, that's true.
She's not wrong. You're not wrong. You are not wrong. But he did make significant statements about it and what he had heard at the time of the murder. But then once investigators looked more into the details of the crime, they realized that, you know, it wasn't true, and it was more inconsistent statements that he had made that didn't exactly fit the crime scene. So then they were like, this guy's just nuts.
Yeah, but if I then was like, oh shit, there's no way anyone would ever know that, I'd start making up things. Do not anyone look at
then
me
they did a
for
voice
anything.
stress test with him, and that was inconsistent as well, which I don't really trust voice stress test or polygraphs.
What is a voice stress
This is
test?
my advice to everyone. If you're ever arrested and they ask you to take a polygraph, don't do it. I don't care how innocent you are.
Amy,
don't do it.
What do? You
Call a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Call an attorney right off the bat. Don't do it.
No, but seriously, what's a voice stress test? I've literally
it's basically a lie detector test, but it's just testing like how
voice
nervous,
goes up.
you're cracking.
Ask me a question.
Basically,
No, seriously.
it's you.
Ask me a question.
What is your name?
Frank?
It went up.
It went, yeah.
God damn it.
You would be awful at that, and so would I.
Do another one.
I take too much medication.
How old are you?
29.
Liar.
Nope.
Lies, all lies. So even more so, whenever they started talking to him, they went in his apartment, started interviewing, and he jokingly said that he had threatened his girlfriend with a hunting knife. If police came in to my apartment and said, hey, by the way, have you ever, do you have knives? Have you ever had any encounter with that? And I said, well, I jokingly threatened my husband with a hunting knife. That's not, yeah, I do every day. Shut up.
He's quietly nodding his head.
Yeah. But, that's not something that I would just say. But his girlfriend did say it happened, that he had. But she also said, no, he would never have done this murder. It wasn't him. But
can
right.
we all just stop pointing knives at each other, though? Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at you back there.
Yeah. Can we just put the knives down for a second and all get along? Now, his employer called the police the following day or within a couple of days from that and said, look, I just wanted to let you know that he's being really irrational at work. He's being aggressive. He's telling people, his coworkers, he's telling them that he killed Tricia. And he later told police that he was just embellishing that just to get attention. This is the William guy, the neighbor that lived across the street.
The one who was recording shit?
Yes.
Although legally
So
fucking
still,
creepy.
maybe he's just batshit crazy because there are those people that are just trying to get attention and, say, oh, I did this or oh, I did that. And that's why, honestly, that is why police don't release all the details to crimes because they have to weed through people like that are just nuts and trying to draw attention.
Yeah, but if someone also then knows the random things that weren't released,
right?
And he's bragging about doing
that's
it.
what I'm saying, though. That's why they have to hold on to a few things that aren't released to keep that from happening, to keep people that are innocent from confessing to crimes that they didn't do, which sounds like a stupid thing to do, but there are people that do it. Now, when police interviewed him at his apartment, they saw that he had a magazine there that was titled Startling Detective Magazine. I know, right? When I read that, I was like, okay, so if they came to my house, I would just go straight to jail. Do not pass go. Don't look in any of the rooms.
Don't look in any room. Also, definitely don't touch that computer.
Don't touch my search history on any device at all. And then they asked if they could take the hunting knife with them to test it. And he originally said yes, and he agreed to take a polygraph. And then before they left, he's like, yeah, no.
But did they have a warrant?
No, not at that time. And then he lawyered up. Yeah, he must listen to the podcast. And he said, no, I'm going to get an attorney. So then they go and get a warrant. They come back to his apartment, and they took with them a 7-inch blade knife, a 4-inch blade knife, a pair of tennis shoes, and a plastic glove.
Just one plastic glove?
Yeah.
So just kind of trying to look things up about William Radiker. We found a few things online. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but you could search Indiana court cases. You know, like you could just type in the name of like your SO or some family member and look up all the shit they've done wrong in the last
we're
like
not
20
responsible
years.
for any outcome of that lookup, so but do that at your own risk.
It's actually fascinating, but I looked him up I mean, Radiker's not too common of a last name, but I was able to find that he's had a history of violent behavior. Like, who I think is him went through a pretty nasty divorce about 15 years ago where his visitation with his children had to be supervised. And I also found a William Radiker in a few small claim court cases with apartment complexes. And what it looked like, there weren't any details given, but it looked like there had been property damage. So if this is the guy that we're talking about, he's had a long list of violence.
I've lived in an apartment, though, and I mean, I didn't go to small claims court, but they did not give me back my security deposit.
Do I need to look you up?
Because of the damn cat and their property damage, because she kind of scratched her claws on every door jam.
Yeah.
So that small claim stuff doesn't bother me that much, but that violent history is although common, but anybody that comes up as a suspect in any murder and is then also had other violent crimes. Come on.
Yeah. Like you want to look at him a little harder.
My gut is saying even if he didn't murder her, he might be guilty of something because he's very concerning.
He might not be the best.
Still go to jail.
Like maybe he didn't kill anyone, but he still has done some shit.
Something. I don't know.
You should check his search history. Don't check ours, but you should check it.
Yeah. But he's also recording everything. He definitely knows something.
Well, if he's recording everything, then don't you think he probably was recording the murder?
Maybe he was just really into true crime back then.
Why didn't he hear the screams?
Maybe he was an OG murderino.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not putting it on.
So you're hating on our own kind.
Yeah.
Some middle-aged dude. I'm not doing it.
Although we don't have a ton
But
of
if you
cases.
hear screams at a golf course and you're right across the street from it, didn't you hear the screams and stuff? And why didn't you go do something? I don't know. It's very odd. But in the 80s, they didn't consider DNA and they didn't have those things. But yet they did collect over 1,000 pieces of evidence from this crime scene. And most of it, unfortunately, couldn't be accounted for because they're residents of the apartment. So if you have DNA of someone like William who lives there, then his DNA is going to be in that laundry room. Right. So
So all of our suspects lived there.
Yeah.
Great.
And they did check. There were some footprints they found near a creek, and they followed that, but that didn't lead to a suspect. They took scrapings under her fingernails. They had hair samples, fiber samples off her body. They were able to pull prints from her body, and the prints didn't match anyone in the database at that time.
So they were able to go and retest everything like around 2012, but they still didn't find anything.
No, which is
with the
baffling to me.
Increase in technology, there was still nothing.
Yes.
Like, do you know if they were able to get a DNA profile?
There wasn't
enough?
By what I found, they had nothing, and the investigator still says that he keeps the crime scene photos on his desk, feeling like he missed something. He can't find anything, and it amazes me that they have 1,000 pieces of evidence and they still have, no way of knowing who this is. But an interesting fact is the day after the murder, a man who identified himself as Steve called 14 separate tenants at that apartment building in Spring Hill. And it all happened between 9 and 10 p.m. And he was threatening the tenants with rape and murder. And he said they were all females. They were all females between the ages of 22 and 54. And he told that he had seen them in the crowd of spectators at the apartment complex after Tricia's body was found in a small closet off the laundry room, which was like one of those details because her body was in the closet and no one would have known that because he pulled her out. So these are the little details. And then the next girl said that he told her she was going to be next. He also told one of the girls, if you don't remain on the line with me, you're going to suffer the same fate as Tricia. He says that he threatened one of the girls' roommates. Now, police suggested that he just picked up their names randomly out of a phone book, because at that time, when your name was in the phone book, it listed your address beside it, and it would have listed that it was Spring Hill Apartments. But two of the women said that they were unlisted, that their name was not in the apartment. So that left the fact that it had to be someone who either had access to the records of the apartment complex to know who lived there and how to get their phone numbers. You know, that's the only option, I think, that it had to be someone who was linked somehow with the apartment complex, because there's no other way for them to know women who lived in the apartment and have their phone numbers. Right. There's just no alternative to that I could figure out. Now, in the Daily Journal in Franklin, Indiana, 7 months after the murder, an article claimed that police said that they know who killed Tricia Meredith, but it may be months before they can prove their case. Now, this was in 1986, and it's been 407 months since then. They said a few. Who's counting? Who's counting? Maybe it's 408 that they're waiting on. But it hasn't.
You
got
to remind them, maybe.
Maybe they just need a little nudge. They also said that they believed the witnesses feared speaking up because something might happen to them, and that happens a lot of the time. You know, people are afraid to come forward, but it's the day and age of Crime Stoppers. It's the day and age where you don't have to give your name. Nobody has to know it was you. Just call and leave a tip. You know, nobody is going to know who did it. Now, her mother died 1 year after the murder, and she was only 40 years old. And her brother Brandon said that he just felt like she just couldn't get over her murder. And then Brandon actually died when he was in only 37. And that was in 2012.
And that makes me think it was some type of genetic heart defect type of thing. But Brandon was the one. I think it
was just stress. I mean, he went years just every single day trying and trying and trying.
He was the one that really advocated to try and find her killer. Like, he was active and did everything he could to try and figure out who it was.
And now there's just no one. Her mom is dead. Her dad's dead. Her brother is now dead.
There's a sister, but I think she's kind of distanced herself from it.
Yeah, she has. And then there's this investigator who lives and dies with it every day, that this is the one. You know, every investigator seems to have this one case that sticks with him throughout, and this is his case. And he's like, you know, I just feel like there's something I missed. But when you have all this DNA and nothing, I don't understand. I mean, you have not DNA, but all this evidence, and you can't get a hit out that. You have literal fingerprints. Why can't you get something with fingerprints? What the hell?
Like, so do you believe that it is solvable?
Absolutely.
So if they went and tested all of the supposed 1,000 pieces of evidence that they have now,
and here's the thing, they said they tested 1,000 pieces of evidence, but I know from a case that we work on with an investigator in LaPorte that when we sent in the evidence on that case, he's told me that each piece of evidence that goes in to be tested for DNA, it's $5,000. So that is, you know, the little girl's socks that we sent off, her one sock was $5,000 to get tested. So when you have a sock to be tested, and then if you send this part of a shirt to be tested, this part of a shirt to be tested, every little piece that has to be run through is $5,000. So they have to pay for this. So I'm not convinced that they tested 1,000 pieces of evidence.
But they paid the $5,000 and then it's sitting in a line.
Oh, yeah. And it's still
very long
sitting
line.
there. It's taken over a year, and that DNA hasn't come back yet. So
if they
it's not
were
like
to just test the knives, because there would obviously be
they didn't
some sort
find
of
the knives. They don't.
the
Knives. You're talking about Williams.
Yeah, Williams knives. I mean, they still have them, right?
Yeah.
So if they were to go back and test those today in 2020 with 2020 technology,
I 100%.
Do you think there would be
believe it's
able-
solvable? But who's going to put out the money? You know, that's the thing that you run into with these departments is the prosecutor, nobody wants to put out the money to solve old cases. And when you have family members that have passed away, no one's pushing for it either. No one thinks about the fact that if this guy did this, then he's probably murdered other people, because if you murder someone and get away with it, the chances that you'll do it again are increasing by the year because I got away with it, you know. But if you were able to run his DNA, and it would probably match more than one case, who knows?
That's just not just go to like Ancestry, because it's like $97 and it comes back within a month.
Yeah, apparently that's illegal.
Oh,
Yeah,
damn.
yeah. Cheap things are illegal at crack. I have a picture of the laundry room and the evidence that's in the laundry room, and then also of her, but now it's gotten dark, and so you can't really see. This is her graduation. It's really weird because she looks like much older. She looks about 30 in this picture instead of I know,
1918.
but yeah, but she's very pretty, and it just makes me sad that no one ever paid for that.
Next week, another case. Until then, our many thanks go out to Sierra from Ash&Elm for allowing us to host your True Crime Night. If you'd like what you've heard, please follow along on social media. Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. After this, the ladies explain their outro.
Every time we end the podcast, we always end it a certain way because Alicia, the very first podcast we had, she had a shitty day and she had an encounter with a pharmacist.
It wasn't the one that's on this podcast, I think.
Yeah, Allie's a pharmacist, by the way. But she had an encounter with the pharmacist, and the pharmacist told her,
have the day you deserve.
Yeah, have the day you deserve. So that has been our go-to line at the end of all our podcasts, because it kind of goes both ways. You can have the day you deserve if you're having a good day, but normally if you tell someone to have the day you deserve, it's...
My thing is, if they're offended, they know they're not being nice.
Yeah.
You know exactly.
Like, you could tell me and I'd be like, thanks, I deserve a good day.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I didn't fuck anything up. You did it.
So when she came to our house and she was like all really shitty, and she was like, have the day you deserve it. And we were like, yep, that's it. That's how we're going to end the podcast. So that's just been it every day. So tonight we'll end the same way. And so
have the day you deserve.
Especially if you don't tip your waitress.
I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.